Have you ever noticed that the moment you start changing, really changing, the people closest to you become the most uncomfortable? You start waking up earlier. You quit the habit that was destroying you. You walk away from the relationship that was draining you. You begin reading, building, becoming, and instead of support, you get silence, distance, subtle mockery, maybe even sabotage. And the most confusing part, these aren't your enemies doing this. These are your friends, your family, the people who claim to want the best for you. So, what happened? Why does your growth feel like a threat to the people around you? The answer isn't comfortable. And if you've been blaming yourself, wondering if you did something wrong, wondering if ambition makes you selfish, wondering if you should shrink back down to keep the peace, then this video is for you. Because Friedrich Nietzsche saw this coming. Over 100 years ago, the man who declared, "God is dead," and shook the foundations of Western philosophy also mapped out one of the darkest, most misunderstood dynamics in all of human psychology. He gave it a name. He dissected it. And what he found will permanently change the way you see the people around you. And more importantly, the way you see yourself. This is not a video about hating people. This is not a video about burning bridges or embracing arrogance. This is a video about understanding the invisible war that begins the moment you decide to become more than what you were. And why most people lose that war. Not because they lack talent, not because they face too many obstacles, but because they don't understand what's happening to them psychologically when the people around them begin to pull them back. Shall we begin? The herd and the one who leaves. Nietzsche believed that most human beings live inside what he called the herd, and he didn't mean this as an insult. He meant it as an observation, a psychological and social reality. The herd is not a place, it is a state of being. It is the collective agreement to stay within accepted limits, to think acceptable thoughts, to desire what everyone around you desires, and to become what the group has already decided is possible. The herd offers something deeply seductive: belonging, safety, identity. When you are part of it, you have a tribe, you have a role, you have a mirror in other people's eyes that tells you who you are. And as long as you stay the same, that mirror stays intact. But the moment you start growing, the moment you begin to question the limits the herd has accepted, the moment you start operating from a different set of values, a different vision of what your life could be, something ruptures. Because your growth forces a question that the herd cannot comfortably answer. If you can change, why can't we? And that question, Nietzsche understood, is not experienced by the herd as inspiration. It is experienced as accusation. Your transformation doesn't just show them what's possible, it shows them what they have been choosing not to do. Every day you wake up earlier, they sleep in a little later and feel it. Every boundary you set reminds them of how many times they said yes when they should have said no. Every risk you take highlights every risk they've been too afraid to take. You haven't done anything to them, but your existence has become a mirror, and some people would rather shatter the mirror than face what it shows. This is where Nietzsche's psychology becomes truly dark, because he didn't just describe the problem. He named the emotional mechanism that drives it. He called it resentment. Resentment is not simple jealousy. Jealousy wants what you have. Resentment wants to destroy it. Nietzsche described it as the emotional state of those who feel powerless to rise themselves, and so redirect that impotence into a covert war against those who do rise. It is the psychology of the person who cannot say, "I want to be great," and so instead begins to say, "Greatness isn't real," or worse, "Who does she think she is?" Here is how it works. Someone around you watches you grow. In the beginning, perhaps they even admire it. But admiration, for someone who feels fundamentally stuck, becomes painful over time. Because admiration without action breeds resentment. They wanted to change. They told themselves they would, but they didn't. And now the sight of your progress is a daily reminder of that internal failure. So the mind does what minds do under unbearable tension. It rewrites the story. It doesn't say, "I am afraid, I gave up, I didn't try." Instead it says, "They got lucky. They think they're better than everyone." That lifestyle is shallow. That ambition is arrogance. That confidence is ego. The goal of resentment is not to build, it is to level, to bring you back down to where the pain of comparison disappears. And it doesn't always look like cruelty. That's the most dangerous part. Resentment wears many masks. It looks like concern. "I just don't want you to get hurt." It looks like wisdom. "You're moving too fast." It looks like loyalty. "Don't forget where you came from." It looks like love. But underneath it all is a quiet, desperate need for you to stop growing so that they can stop feeling. Nietzsche warned us, the people most likely to hold you back are not the ones who openly oppose you. They are the ones who wrap their fear in the language of care. If this content changes something in you, click the subscribe button and subscribe the channel. The Will to Power and Why It Terrifies Others. To understand why your growth unsettles people at such a primal level, you have to understand one of Nietzsche's most misunderstood ideas, the will to power. This concept has been corrupted, weaponized, misread as a celebration of domination, aggression, and control over others. That is not what Nietzsche meant, not even close. The will to power, for Nietzsche, was the fundamental drive in every human being towards self-overcoming. The deep, biological, existential urge to grow beyond what you currently are, to master yourself, to create, to expand your capacity for life. It is the force that makes an athlete push past exhaustion. It is what makes an artist stay up until 3 a.m., pursuing something that isn't there yet. It is the voice inside you that says, more. Not more money, not more status, more becoming. Every person has this drive. But here is the dark truth Nietzsche observed. Most people are afraid of it. Not of power in others, of power in themselves. Because the will to power, fully embraced, demands that you take radical responsibility for your life. It demands that you stop blaming circumstances, stop waiting for permission, stop hiding behind the expectations of the herd. It demands that you become the author of your own existence, and that is terrifying. So what happens to people who are afraid of their own will to power? They don't simply suppress it and move on. Suppressed power doesn't disappear. It mutates. It turns inward and becomes self-destruction. Or it turns outward and becomes resentment of those who aren't afraid to grow. When you grow, you are living proof that the will to power is real, that it is possible, that it is a choice. And that is the most threatening thing you can be to someone who has decided, consciously or not, to deny that drive in themselves. You are not just succeeding, you are, in their eyes, exposing a lie they've been telling themselves for years. The Übermensch, becoming who you are. Nietzsche's most radical idea was the Übermensch, often translated as the Overman or Superman. And again, this idea has been grotesquely misused. It was never about race or ruling others, or any of the dark political appropriations that followed Nietzsche's death. The Übermensch was a philosophical ideal, a psychological archetype. It described the human being who has fully committed to the project of self-creation. The person who does not outsource their values to the crowd, to tradition, to the approval of others, but who looks inward and asks, what do I genuinely value? What kind of person do I intend to become? And then lives that answer without apology and without waiting for permission. Nietzsche's challenge to each of us was this: become who you are, not who your parents needed you to be, not who your culture decided was safe, not the smaller, quieter, less threatening version of yourself that keeps the people around you comfortable, but the full, authentic, terrifying, beautiful truth of what you are capable of. And the path to that, Nietzsche knew, is not paved with applause. It is paved with the discomfort of those who cannot follow you, and who, in their discomfort, will try to bring you back. The ones who call your ambition arrogance. The ones who whisper that you've changed as if change were a betrayal. The ones who disappear when your life begins to look different from the life they'd imagined for you. These are not enemies to be defeated. In Nietzsche's framework, they are simply people still inside the cave, and you have made the mistake of coming back to tell them about the sun. What to do with this knowledge? Understanding the dark psychology of why people fear your growth is not a reason for contempt. It is a reason for compassion and clarity. Compassion, because most people doing this are not malicious. They are afraid. The parent who undermines your ambition is in many cases a person who once had ambitions of their own and buried them under survival and obligation. The friend who mocks your discipline is someone who privately longs for the self-control they cannot access. They are suffering, not visibly, not dramatically, but in the quiet, corrosive way that comes from denying the will to power in yourself year after year. You can see them with empathy and still refuse to go back. That is the hard part. Because love is real. Connection is real. The fear of losing people who matter to you is one of the most powerful forces that keeps human beings from growing. And Nietzsche, for all his severity, understood this too. But he also knew that you cannot help someone else rise by shrinking yourself down to meet them. You cannot model courage through compliance. The most generous thing you can do for the people around you, even those who fear your growth, is to grow anyway, fully, without apology. Because some of them, when you refuse to stop, will eventually follow. And those who don't, you let them go. Not with hatred, not with drama, but with the quiet, painful grace of someone who has finally chosen their own life. Nietzsche wrote, "The secret for harvesting from existence the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment is to live dangerously, not recklessly." Dangerously, meaning willing to risk the comfort of approval in exchange for the authenticity of becoming. The final truth here is what no one tells you about growth. The loneliness is real. There will be a version of your journey where you look around and realize that the people you started with are not the people who will finish with you. That is not failure. That is the price of becoming. Nietzsche did not promise that this path would be easy. He promised that it was the only path worth taking for anyone who takes their one life seriously. So ask yourself this: who have you been holding back from becoming because you are afraid of what the people around you would say? What version of yourself have you been quietly suppressing to maintain the comfort of belonging? And here is the deepest question of all: what would your life look like if you stopped needing people who fear your growth to approve of it? You don't owe anyone your smallness. Your growth is not a betrayal of the people you love. It is the greatest gift you can give them. Proof that more is possible, that change is real, that the human being, even after all the conditioning and fear and years of shrinking, can still wake up one day and choose to become. That is Nietzsche's legacy. Not nihilism, not arrogance, but this radical, defiant, luminous truth. You were not born to be managed by other people's fear of you. You were born to become who you are. And the world, however uncomfortable it makes the herd, needs you to do exactly that. If this spoke to something inside you, tell me in the comments, who in your life has feared your growth? Or are you still becoming brave enough to begin? Because your story isn't finished. And sometimes, the fact that people are afraid of what you're becoming is the clearest sign that you're becoming something real. Don't stop now. Your transformation is waiting.